Have you ever wanted to learn Lightning Web Components, or LWC for short? Wish you knew common mistakes LWC developers can easily make? Here's your chance. In this video, Nathan Shulman, a Salesforce developer with over 20 years of technical experience, teaches what not to do when writing Lightning Web Components. Welcome. It's Rachel and Jessica from 100 Days of Trailhead, the place where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, have fun, and invest in ourselves. Whether you are brand new to learning Salesforce and starting from the beginning, or mid-career and skilling up for that new opportunity, we are your trail guides here to support you with an itinerary to help you get where you're going. You are in the right place. If you are new to our channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so you can be notified when we release a new video. In the description below, you can find links on everything we mention in this video, in addition to links we find helpful, like books that have helped us and our friends along our tech and Salesforce journeys. To find other helpful Salesforce and tech content, visit our blog at 100daysoftrailhead.com. In this video, Nathan Shulman discusses mistakes he made when writing Lightning Web Components. Nathan is a technology professional with over 20 years of experience and 10 years in financial services. Nathan has over 8 years of experience with Salesforce administration and development, with a current focus on Lightning development, including Lightning Web Components and Aura Components. Nathan has a background in enterprise software development using Salesforce as well as Microsoft.NET, MS SQL Server, and React with Node.js. Your quest, should you choose to take it, is to journey with us through the adventure of learning Lightning Web Components. Your quest begins now.
Hi, I'm Nathan Shulman. I'm a software developer at Accenture, and I'm currently working with LWC very extensively on a project. And rather than explaining myself, I'm going to tell you a fun fact, which is that I met Carrie Russell when I was about 15 or 16 years old, and we went on a school trip to the Mickey Mouse show, and I was in the audience, and I asked her, "Are you going to be famous one day?" And she said, "I hope so." So with that, I'll just get right to it. This is a lightning presentation, so I'll get through these topics quickly. These are the top 5 LWC mistakes that I never want to make again. And then for whatever reason, I think there's a Taylor Swift song that looks more like this. I never, ever, ever want to make these mistakes again. I would write a song about it if I was able to. So the first mistake that I have made was not using a unique key in an iteration, and more specifically, a Lightning data table. So I have a short story about that. We had a data table. It probably had 200 different rows in it. And the rows would update if you made a change. The certain fields would update, and for some reason we got into Safari. We were testing it in Safari, which is what the users on the road used on an iPad, and the data table took maybe 2 minutes to render. So after looking into it and almost thinking we couldn't use it on Safari, we found out that I had used the wrong key name for the key field. So a key in an iteration, it would be this example on the right. So you can have issues if you use a key that is not unique, as you can see here. I mean, this one could either be not unique or even maybe a property that's undefined, and you'll have issues with your data tables. Or if you're doing an iteration and doing something like a list, you also have to provide a key to the first element. And in this case, I've used a fruit color. So fruit colors are not unique, and you can have an issue here. On the right, I use a unique identifier, and I use the correct casing and spelling of the identifier. And for here, I have a fruit ID. So assume this is a grocery store and each fruit has some kind of unique key. Then you have to make sure the key is exactly correct. If it's not correct, so if it's the case, the name of the variable, or the variable is undefined, you do not have a unique key, but your tables will render, and your iterations will render. So what you can do is you can look in the console and you can see if you have any errors. So here's an example of using an identifier that where I use the wrong case. So property doesn't exist, and I'll get an invalid key attribute. And here's another one. Fruits don't have eyes, so they don't have eye color. So fruit.eye color doesn't exist on a fruit. You'll end up getting this invalid key attribute. But in the example of fruit.color, you'll see an error more like this. There's a duplicated key attribute. Colors aren't unique across fruits. You're going to get an error, and you'll only see it in the console. Everything will appear to work, but you can cause performance issues if your key isn't unique, and clearly Safari just hates it. So my second mistake that I have made is trying to fight with third-party JavaScript libraries. So I wanted to use a third-party library in LWC. I even asked the developer if they would modify how it works, and they don't want to do that. They don't have time for that. So one thing to just assume is that your third-party library will probably not work because of the locker service, which is the security layer on top of LWC. One thing that's really, really important about third-party libraries is there may be one that everybody uses and everybody knows, but you try it and it doesn't work. So my story I'm going to tell you about Chart.js is that I spent a very, very long time trying to troubleshoot an issue with Chart.js, and a new version had just come out. And unfortunately, that version broke the LWC rendering of the chart. So I couldn't see the chart. I tried everything. I couldn't find enough information about it because it was a relatively new issue. And what I ended up doing was something I'm going to recommend on the next slide, which is not taking advantage of LWC recipes. So with the chart, I looked at the LWC recipes and I saw which version the recipes used, and I also I took the exact resource of the Chart.js library out of LWC, and that worked because version 3.73 works, but not 3.92. So taking advantage of LWC recipes, and if you're not familiar, it's a several LWC examples that you can install in your dev org. The examples are very useful. They cover a lot of ground, I think. So I recommend always having a dev org with your recipes handy so that you can connect to it and use it as a reference. I also recommend if you install other LWC packages, you get lots of sample code. If you want to try to emulate what one of the other apps, you have Dreamhouse, e-bikes, and a few, maybe 2 or 3 more. You can look at how that works and then go into the code and get a good example for how you can solve certain problems. So, as I mentioned with Chart.js, I was able to look at the recipe and see exactly what made Chart.js work. And that's how I realized it was the version issue. So this one is a really big topic for me and something that I have found really important with all my LWC development, primarily not understanding enough JavaScript, but I also added the Lightning Design System here, SLDS. It's very important to understand the core concepts to get better results in LWC of JavaScript and SLDS. So for JavaScript specifically, it's helpful to be able to use functions like map and filter, find, reduce. You can make much cleaner code and more concise code. But I guess another example is knowing when to use arrow functions versus functions. And the next comment I have here, which is you have this, and I don't like to say this word, and I actually co-presented with someone who would not allow me to say it, but syntactic sugar or cool looking code is not always as useful as readability. So sometimes it's really nice to make a function so when the next developer sees what you've done, they can get a clean, easier, faster understanding of what you've done. But arrow functions are great because you can have a really simple inline function, and they're nice to look at, and they can really clean up your code. So another thing that I'll get to on the next slide is it's important to understand the class structure in JavaScript, and some of the object-oriented features that it offers. And then back to the Lightning Design System. If you learn the Lightning Design System and you're not scared of it, you can make a much better user interface. You can make it cleaner. You can make it look like the rest of Salesforce. And I see a lot of developers using some, older CSS styles and fonts with pixel sizes. And, I just have to say that when I started really embracing the Lightning Design System and learning it, I started using the Lightning layout. It's very powerful. You can make a grid that renders completely differently on a phone or a tablet or a desktop. And to me, I think the SLDS isn't as scary as it was at first. I find them really useful. Um, and it's just important to be familiar with it and not look at it as some foreign language. I also recommend to get better with JavaScript. There is the You Don't Know JavaScript series, which is great. There's an intro book that is probably all you need, but they go in depth, and I love how the author truly tries to understand JavaScript. Um, the JavaScript 1 certification, I've started studying for it, and I've heard it's very challenging. Someone told me that he cried at the end of it because it was not what he expected, and I've been going through the materials and the study guide, and just going through it alone has helped me improve my JavaScript. There's a site called Code Wars where you solve little puzzles with code. That is it's very challenging, but really fun, and I've learned some cool techniques that other people use. And then there's always W3 schools. They're awesome and have great tutorials that you can modify. So here's an example of something I learned along the way after using LWC and always wondering, why does this work this way? I don't understand it because I was used to older style JavaScript. So this is an example, something you might find similar. You might find something similar on W3 Schools. And this is a class, a pet. So for anyone familiar with object-oriented development, you have a constructor. It has a method called speak. It acts differently based on the type of pet you have. And on the right, you see here that if I instantiate a pet and I'm making a dog named Doug, and I want to assign the result of the speak method to noise, I send it to the console, and the dog says woof. So just understanding the basics of a class will make you realize that wait a minute, this is very similar to a lightning element. So you always build these lightning elements. And what had been challenging for me at the beginning was knowing when to use the this dot properties. Well, this username right here is a class property. You don't think of it as a variable, it's a property. If I declare it outside of the class, it's a variable. I can use const and let or var. And then you can see here, this is a method. The handlers look like this. You don't say the word function. You don't use an arrow function. So this is the class. This is just the basic class design. And it's also really important that when you're referencing a property that you've created in your class, you have to access it with this dot. So the username is the property here. When I say hello, I want to say this dot username. So just understanding a class alone is a great example of how you can, if you know the JavaScript syntax, then LWC development is going to make more sense to you. So one of the things I'd also, a mistake I don't want to make again is either using LWC when I shouldn't, or using another programming model when I should use LWC. So using LWC, it's something you want to use when you have really complex pages, you need better performance. You know, taking Aura and improving the performance of it, you can do one component at a time, because LWC can be a child component of Aura. And then, you know, if your team, let's say you hire someone who has been working in Angular or React for a few years, but you want to have them develop LWC components, it's more in line with that type of development. So, you know, the cross-platform, actually not cross-platform, but the transferable skills that you can get with LWC, or bring in someone with transferable skills, is a big advantage. And it's also something that's really important to be able to explain to stakeholders, you know, why we want to start building in LWC. Now, when you don't want to use LWC, I have a story of a big mistake where we tried to do something too complicated and rewrite it in LWC that was an Aura page. It looked like it was easy to rebuild, but it had tons of logic, hidden pieces of the page that expanded, that, you know, I wasn't even aware of. And we ended up having to just go ahead and use Aura for it, because so much was already there. So, you know, it's really important to know, like, when should I not use LWC? So, you know, Visualforce and Apex, you probably want to avoid it if you can, but, you know, maybe the team doesn't know Aura or LWC and it would take too much time to train. You also have to, Visualforce and Apex is awesome for like really quick development for a page that you may just load a bunch of data and throw away. It also has a little bit less security, so you can use more third-party components with it. So if you absolutely have to get a third-party component on the screen, Visualforce is an option. And then you may also need to use Aura, and the reason why is that the components are already built, like I mentioned on the last slide. You may need an Einstein Analytics control. So the Wave Dashboard component is the name of the Einstein Analytics component. The chatter control has to be in Aura. And also, if you have a child Aura component that you need to put into something, then LWC cannot hold Aura components. And there are more base components available in Aura than LWC at this time, so make sure you're familiar with all the base components.
Are you interested in learning LWC? Have you ever written a Lightning Web Component? What mistakes have you made that you want to warn other Salesforce developers about? Comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Since you've stayed with us, here's a bonus. It is easy to not see a syntax, name, or case error. Let's watch as Nathan explains.
So I got one more bonus mistake that I never want to make again, and I probably will, but hopefully I can use this system here to figure it out faster. But if you, not being able to see an error has cost me hours of time, because the error handling is it's not quite as clear as something like Apex or, you know, Microsoft.NET. So some examples of what you could do wrong is you're using the wrong variable name in the HTML. That's why you never see whatever you have created, or, you know, property is not visible on the page because you're using the wrong name. If the variable property name, even the scope of it is wrong in JavaScript, you can really have issues. If you're accessing the wrong variable, it could cause a problem. If the syntax is wrong, if the comma is wrong, the parentheses are in the wrong place, or even the curly braces, you can have issues. You know, you may declare the scope wrong, be passing a parameter to the wrong function, or something like that. And then, you know, if you don't access a class property with this, then you could be pulling a variable from the page, or you won't get any kind of warning and you'll just have an undefined variable. So this is an example. I'll end this presentation with a little game. So spot the difference, and I'll give you a minute. Okay, time's up. So let's look at what was wrong. The one on this works the way I expect on the left. The one on the right does not. So the first issue here, I spelled a property wrong. If I'm raising an event and I spell detailed wrong, I'm going to create an object with a misspelled property, and the event will fire, and nothing can actually use that because nothing's expecting detail with two E's. Second issue is I've used the wrong variable here. So if you look on the left, you'll see this dot. I wanted the property off my class, but instead I took this selected ID that I declared on the page, which is not what I wanted to raise in my event. And the final one, and this one, I can tell you, I never would have found it, but I put the comma and the parentheses in the wrong place. So number 3 right here, you can see I raise a new custom event and I pass in the parameter notify. All this detail information needs to go into that custom event. So if you look over here, I'm passing it in to there. And the issue here is that I'm passing this parameter to dispatch event, which doesn't expect it. So nothing happens. And the 2 hours of my life that I spent trying to figure it out will never return. And I hope that this will help you so that you can have more time in your life not troubleshooting JavaScript.
Thank you for spending time with us. Make sure you like this video. It helps a lot. Click subscribe and on the notification bell so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos, which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on Instagram, Twitter, and on our website at 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.